Shit seems so sad when you look back. Shit seems so sad when you look back. Shit seems so sad when you look back. Everything's so sad when you look back. Well, let's look back. We pulled up to my grandmother's house, a small Philadelphia row home, bought 50 years ago for $8,000. My family went from being the first black family surrounded by racist whites to seeing a B-52 of poverty drop on the neighborhood during the crack epidemic, to seeing whites buy homes for $300,000. It was now the place where we found my uncle, pacing back and forth and crying on the same porch I once played with imaginary friends on. As we entered the home, all I could think about was myself and how I wanted to do anything but go upstairs and look at my grandfather's cold, lifeless body. But of course, that is exactly what I was expected to do. As I walked upstairs, my grandfather's body laid on the floor. His once almond color was now turning gray. His red flannel shirt still attached to him, as well as the off-white, dingy-colored boxers he was known for walking around the house in, despite company. Shortly after viewing his body, I walked back downstairs, just as my family did something I rarely seen them do, which might be odd coming from a black family. We prayed. I held my grandmother's hand, the same hand that picked cotton on the fields of South Carolina as a child, and I vowed to myself to do better. During the funeral, since I was the oldest grandson, it was expected that I give the eulogy. All I could do was think back to the first funeral I ever attended, which was for my mother's first cousin who died of complications of AIDS, or as it was stated, pneumonia. Since back then, having died of AIDS was seen as a family secret that everyone knew about but didn't talk about. My grandfather would laugh hysterically days after my mother and I's apparent sadness and said, "We look like the blind leading the blind." I guess to him, we should have been not as emotional in that instance. It should have been more stoic, despite the fact that I was only 10 and my mother lost her favorite cousin. My grandfather would send me to the store for his Pall Mall Gold cigarettes, take me with him to the neighborhood speakeasy in the middle of the day, share stories about how he got so drunk and lost that he almost ended up walking onto the highway. He would sing songs about wine to me, and how light-skinned women were better looking than dark-skinned women, even though his wife, the granddaughter of slaves, and most of his kids were dark-skinned. He would show up to one of my basketball games drunk, dressed in his favorite black Stacey Adams shoes, tan leisure suit with the top 2 buttons open, in an attempt to fight the coach for not giving me playing time, which I did only average 4 points, but I still deserved more playing time. So if it was today, I'd have been like, "That's right, granddaddy. I deserve more clock." Like clockwork, he would leave every morning at 11 and wouldn't return until night. I remember my grandmother and grandfather fighting one night. My grandfather punched my grandmother in the mouth as they lay side by side. My grandmother spoke, blood still in the mouth, the same color as cherry Kool-Aid, and defiantly laughed at the scratches she left on his back with the vitriol of a woman who had been abused physically and mentally for far too long. My grandfather looked on, ashamed, wincing in pain. As my grandfather got older, and the songs about wine and light-skinned women turned to songs about Jesus, as he stopped drinking and running the streets, I started drinking and running the streets, spending less and less time with him. As he started to get sicker and sicker, my trips to my grandparents' house became fewer and fewer. I thought my grandfather's sickness was something he would bounce back from, almost like a hangover. It wasn't. Now I stood over his casket, emotionless, because that is what was expected, and that is probably what he would have wanted. When I was done speaking and the funeral ended, my mother introduced me to old friends as they raved about how well-spoken I was. The only thing nobody questioned was why I wasn't crying. Give up these chains, never. Show them my pain, never. Give up my pride, never. Show them my fears, never. Show them my tears, never. Show them my tears, never. Show them my tears, never. I can remember each time that I've cried since I was literally 13. Once, my mother hit me with a yellow wiffle ball bat on my grandmother's porch to prove a point to the neighbors across the street who had a son who was considered the bad kid on the block. I ran in the house, bursting into tears from embarrassment as my grandmother consoled me, as my mother and uncles told me I was getting too old to be crying like that. These were probably words that were echoed by our ancestors who were forced to beat their children so their slave masters would not kill them for their perceived wrongdoings. In modern times, it's so police won't shoot our young black boys in the backs or mysteriously kill our young black women in jail cells. Once when I was in high school, I broke down in my mother's arms on our blue corduroy couch. I asked to come to the pain of being a young black boy, feeling like nothing was good enough for my mom or society. The next time would be when I was 21 and was fired for allegedly stealing from a job. I stole, but not that time that I got fired. I went home to my then girlfriend who was white and I cried. I cried because despite her locks and olive complexion, she would never understand what I was going through as a black man. I cried because I felt the weight of who I was and would have to be for the rest of my life. I cried because I was made to look like something I never really was nor would be. A thief, except for like occasionally, but you know. And I cried because I was defenseless to the stereotypes that were placed upon me. It would take me another 21 years to shed another tear. During most of my adult life, I wore not crying as a badge of honor, using words like soft to describe some of my male emotional friends, using laughter to cover up anything that might be remotely serious. While sick last year, I cried at my kitchen table, unable to leave the house, go to work, or do anything until wait till my virus ended. I broke down and cried as my wife provided all the right words and emotions like she was prone to do. A part of me felt like I was sad to see my personal streak ended, like it was like a baseball or basketball streak, like an Iron Man streak or something. Another was happy that I was actually human and capable of normal human emotions. As a black man, I was taught, like many others, that crying is something that wasn't acceptable, even before I left first grade. I now know that crying is a cathartic, normal emotion, but I still find it hard to do what I was programmed not to do most of my life. But over the last year, I've challenged myself to feel, even shedding one long single tear during the movie. I've embraced hugging my homies when I see them, holding them just a little longer and making sure that they know that I love them. I even try to feel, my wife asks me questions I don't really know how I feel, I still come up with something now. When I say usually I used to be like, I don't know, but now I try to come up with some type of emotion or feeling or question or a yes. I will be graduating with my master's degree in a couple of months and would really love to cry some tears of joy because not many people like me make it to that point in life or level. But I also realize that I can't just snap my fingers like Thanos and avenge the lifetime that I've spent emotionless. This was reflections of your strong friend. You need to check up on your strong friend. Nobody checks up on your strong friend. If that's your strong friend, then who the fuck are you then?